Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. My name is David Higgins. It's so good to have you with us today. I really love the conversation we're about to have. It's really one of those unique conversations. It's about a very difficult subject, but inside of the subject has brought another level of leadership. And it's that leadership that I want you to be able to understand is so important within the nonprofit life. The subject we're talking about is understanding the power of teamwork. And how do you build teamwork in stressful, sometimes even depressive situations where you're overcoming major issues in your community and helping those that are hurting the most. That's why this conversation is so important. And I really hope you enjoy it. This particular episode is brought to us by the book, Demystifying Fundraising Funnels. It is a digital marketing blueprint to fund your nonprofit. And the most amazing thing in this day and age is we have shifted quickly in the last couple of years from just tactile fundraising to online fundraising, understanding that we are needing to shift as organizations. And one of the things that's most important is that when you look at the statistics over the last 2 years, the nonprofits that have really embraced taking their fundraisers online or hybriding their fundraisers with online power have actually grown by double digits in income, even across all sectors. But those that have not have actually decreased their income by up to 5 to 10%, sometimes even 15 or more. We live sometimes by grant, and it's one, if we lose a grant, we lose programs that hurt people. But if we can start learning how to implement online funding tools, we'll be able to access the ability to stabilize our income if we lose a grant. It's phenomenal information that I really think it can be a help to you. If you have any questions, email us, call us. We love those conversations as well. Well, today's conversation is even more exciting. And we are talking to a guest who is a team builder in what can be a very difficult and heartbreaking nonprofit focus. She graduated with a master's degree from University of Southern Carolina with a focus on criminology and criminal justice. She has worked for the last 9 years, starting as a case manager and then rising through the responsibilities until now. She is the executive director of Rebuilding Hope Sexual Assault Center for Pierce County. She works every day inside the turning wheel of leadership, team building, crisis management, and client care. Let's welcome Carlyn Sampson to the Nonprofit Podcast. Carlyn, it is so good to have you with us.
Thank you, David. It's really great to be here today to be part of this conversation.
You're so busy, you very rarely do interviews like this. And so I'm really grateful that you chose to speak with us today, because what I have found in what you are doing, I think could be a real help to all of us.
Absolutely. No, I was excited to get the opportunity because I don't think we pause enough, at least in this sphere that I get to work in. We don't pause enough just to talk about the impact of the work, what it has on us, and how it really influences how we show up in leadership and how we support each other in the work every day.
Before we get into the really hard questions,
Yeah.
I want to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
You know, you went to the University of Tennessee and Southern Carolina, and now you live in the Northwest. What brought you to the Pacific Ocean?
It was actually a choice. It wasn't a choice that we were expecting, but we were military transplants. My husband was active duty Army at the time, and we had the rare opportunity to actually choose our duty station of where we were going to be, changing stations out to. And we knew people out here that were at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and they said that they loved the area and that we should give it a try. So we had, nothing really holding us back. We both grew up in southern states, and we decided, let's give the Pacific Northwest a try. So I remember my husband was in the middle of a year-long deployment to Afghanistan. He took his 2 weeks R&R break to pick me up in South Carolina, pack up our whole life into a U-Haul, haul that cross country, and then drop me off in Pierce County, Washington. And then he had to redeploy back to Afghanistan for another 6 or 7 months. So I really had to piece together kind of our life and our next steps in an area that I had, other than a couple of other military families, no connections to, and kind of find our way through this spot of the country. And we ended up really falling in love with it and deciding to plant some more permanent roots here. So when he switched from active duty to serving the National Guard, we decided to stay here in Washington State. So now Tacoma is our hopefully permanent and forever home. And we both have been able to find kind of our work identities in the same community as well.
Well, thank you for serving our country that way as a family.
Yeah.
We all appreciate it. We really do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You know, your whole life, you're being in the study of and a seeker of justice. Justice
Mhm.
is a big issue as a theme through everything I've read as we were doing research for this conversation.
Mhm.
Especially when those have been hurt and can't defend themselves. It seems like you put on your knight in shining armor and jump on your horse and dive into battle. Where does this passion of healing the hurting come from? Where does it stem out of?
No, that's a really good question because we get asked that all the time across people in our organization. Um, my answer, from my perspective, and I could turn out to be wrong later in life, but I have found that there are people that are either born with or they're socialized to have higher senses of empathy in general for people who experience pain, people who experience injustice, suffering. And I believe that from the time I was a pretty young girl, that sense of empathy was just part of my own growth and identity. And I remember, probably as too young of a child, the first book I read that to me was a non-school book was Tears of Rage by John Walsh. And so learning about crimes like rape, murder, anything that's kind of in that physical or gender-based violence world, domestic violence, I got a real abrupt exposure to that just through reading those materials. And I remember, again, I think I must have been about 10 years old, feeling this immense sense of, I can't believe this type of harm happens to people in the world. This is horrible. Nobody should have to experience this. And while I don't know if I can stop those things from happening, if people are going to experience this type of violence, they deserve to have really compassionate, caring, and capable people available to them for the aftermath. And I just remember thinking as a young girl, I hope I can be part of that aftermath. I hope I can be part of that help. I didn't know if it was going to be through lawmaking. I didn't know if it was going to be through law enforcement. I had all these ideas because I didn't necessarily want to be any type of a savior in that situation, but I wanted to be somebody who could be that first response and who could be a part of that person's healing or safety journey. That led me to get more interested in learning about the criminal justice system. So I paid close attention as much as I could. I had a family that was in law enforcement. My father, his father, they had served in local jurisdictions back home. I read lots of books by federal agents, by law enforcement departments, trying to understand, okay, what is this criminal justice system that is obviously so integral in, at least responding to this type of violence. And as I grew up, as we all do, into adulthood, my own personal pain, trauma experiences only, I think, increased that sense of empathy and that desire to keep myself rooted as best as I could, or as welcomed as I would be in supporting people after horrible things had happened to them. That I have learned in that journey that justice means different things for different people. That's probably been one of the most revelatory pieces of doing nonprofit work, of doing, survivor-centered work. So I didn't actually know about nonprofit community-based victim advocacy opportunities until I was in graduate school. It just never came up for me in the undergrad sphere that I was in. But when I came out here to Washington and I was trying to figure out, okay, my schooling is done. I've had a myriad of other professional experiences, but I don't know where my footing is going to be in this social justice sphere. It was actually hard to find work. A lot of those sectors were on hiring freezes. They were not hiring friendly. This was in your 2011, 2012 timeframe. And so my thought was, I just have to find a way to start being involved in the work, even if it means volunteering. And that's actually how I started with Rebuilding Hope. My first, formal position was in being a full-time advocate and building up to a case manager. But actually, my first role with the agency was I was a volunteer victim advocate on the 24-hour hotline. And I was doing that while working a couple of restaurant jobs, trying to just make sure that our household could pay our bills. And I remember responding out, taking that first shift on the hotline, responding out to my first hospital call, and realizing what actually doing that work meant, showing up for that survivor. And I knew then I had found a place that I just hoped I could be a part of and stay a part of. And I've never really looked back. I've never thought about going to get a law degree or going into criminal or going into law enforcement. I thought, no, this is a space that needs people who are willing to be there and to learn and to grow and to support the survivors and their families exclusively with no other agenda.
I have three children, and then we had three other children join us as young teenagers, and
Mhm.
we went through high school with six kids,
Wow.
all in a 5-year period. And the
Mhm.
local high school was called Kearney, and they had their school about 2,500
Okay.
with uh, 58 languages spoken there. A lot of immigrants. We're in San Diego, so there
Okay.
was it was a very much a high immigrant area of the city. All five religions were seen on campus. It was one of these real melting pot type of campuses, and my children, as they went through that process every year, we were very interested. But we have one child like yourself, high empath. Just
Mhm.
we found that the value he had is he'd see things completely different, and even as a young child, but as a teenager, his senior year, we were called into the principal's office, and she said, what do you need to see us here for? And she said, I want you to come out to the lunchroom and watch what's happening in the lunchroom. She said, year after year, we've had a certain group of very disconnected children at this school, and they're the first ones to drop out during the school year. They do very poorly on their testing. Their suicide rate is high among
Mhm.
them. And I want you to see what's taking place. And we walk out there, and it's halfway through the school year, and at lunchtime, underneath the tree in the big open area where everybody's having lunch, San Diego, you can do that in
Mhm.
the middle of winter.
Okay.
Judah's there with his guitar, just clowning around and doing some, stuff on his guitar. Next to him is Sandra, one of our daughters that joined us as a teenager. And there is 58 children, teenagers, not children, they're teenage, young adults, around them, just eating lunch, laughing, pushing each other, teasing. And I said, what am I looking at? She goes, those are all the kids that don't have any friends on the school campus.
Mm.
And what Judah had started doing without telling anybody, he went and got
Mhm.
his sister Sandra, and they started going through every lunch, the first 5 minutes of every lunch before they start down and eat, find all the kids that are sitting in the corners, sitting in the shadows, sitting by themselves, being pushed
Mhm.
around by others, and inviting them to sit with them under the tree and just have fun and eat their lunch. And by the time they got there, 58 of these kids, and they're a motley crew. I mean, every size, shape, look, color, the unpopular of the unpopular. And she goes, five of those kids got kicked out of the school halfway through last year, and we brought because of regulation, they were brought back into the school,
Okay.
and now they're actually getting C's in school. He says they have a social life around them, and as a society, sometimes we don't see the power and the
Mhm.
importance of the people that have that empathy and what they bring to society. Judah would quickly slide quietly in the background, except for
Mhm.
this one thing he had, is that he saw other kids that he could be, and he
Mhm.
draw them to himself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it brings smiles to society. And I like to surround myself with people like that. They're okay. It
I
sounds like a
agree.
total dad thing to say. They're precious. They're
No, but it's
important. They're needed.
it's it's true. When some of our staff get asked either, in a one-off or maybe in a group setting, why do you do this work? There can be this initial assumption of, well, you must do this work because this happened to you, right? I lead a sexual assault center. Name any other type of center that maybe serves victims of intimate partner violence or trafficking or people who are experiencing homelessness. There's always this assumption of this must have happened to you or somebody that you know. And that could definitely be, and most often, just how we know how the frequency at which those types of experiences impact people. That could be the case. But I remember one of our coordinators responded to that question in such a true way that resonated with me. She said, why wouldn't I want to do this work? What is so surprising about people just wanting to show up and be helpful to people who have either experienced something horrific or have been impacted by the world around us to a point where they don't have the same opportunities that I have had or that others have had. And that's what I think really has been, part of the call that's brought me to this work and kept me in this work isn't so much necessarily about a personal narrative that drove me to ending up one day being able to lead in a sexual assault center, but it was that general empathy, you know bred backbone of,
Mhm.
no, we are here to serve and to support each other and to have that heart. But again, not, I think people have it in different levels of intensity. And so you definitely see the people with the higher levels, I think, show up in human services work, whether or not they have their own personal narrative to attach to that type of work.
There's something to be said about see the need, feel the need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ever since you left university,
Mm-hmm.
to one degree or another, you've been pulled into leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You've been put in a position of caring for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You even married a man who does that. In the military, he carries that leadership role
Yep.
in respect of that. And what attracts you to leadership? There's many people that just push away from it, but you've actually lent into it and became a team builder, a good team builder. What was that attraction?
I think I've definitely leaned into it more than I've sought it out, if you will. I I'm wondering, I don't know if I believe it 100%, but how much of it is personality driven. I know that there's tons of research, tons of psychologically based research around it. But even going back a decade plus, because you mentioned about, what you've learned about myself, my husband, our trajectory, and how they both leaned into leadership. I remember when we were going through some military framed premarital counseling, we had to do a personality assessment, and it was a very basic one. I don't know if it's in any way statistically significant to our world, but I forget even how the personality assessment was framed, but there were basically 4 animals that as we finished the survey, we were going to be told what our basically representative animal was and then what the secondary was. So that was kind of to show the primary personality and some of the secondary personality traits. The 4 animals was the lion, the otter, the beaver, and the golden retriever. And still to this day, I couldn't tell you exactly what the
I've taken the
labels.
exact same test.
You have you? Okay. So we did.
I was the golden retriever.
Were you? So I was over here thinking, oh, I love the golden retriever, intelligent, loyal. These are just the things that I assumed was paired with animals. Well, we took the test and the counselor came out and he said, well, both of your primary personalities are drawn to the lion. And I remember he talked to us about how that could mean, that we end up challenging each other quite a bit, both in our personal, in our marriage and in our professional lives. But our secondary personalities, I was the beaver and he was the otter. And they talked about how the beaver is always, diligent and applied and disciplined and working and always, building the home, stowing things away. And the otter is over here, saying, come play with me, let's go frolic in the water. And
Somebody's got to be fun.
It's got to be fun. And so to this day, as simplistic as it is, that personality assessment has kind of, shown to be true. Because we both ended up, whether it was done consciously or unconsciously, we've leaned into leadership. And for me, I can't speak for him, never would dare to, but when there were opportunities for me to lean into leadership, I didn't necessarily want to. I've been told I'm kind of that, reluctant leader, because I didn't want to be the center of attention or the focal point. I don't necessarily carry the confidence of an authority figure with me that sometimes I wish I had, but it's just not a natural part of who I am. But I leaned into leadership because there were gaps where those leadership roles needed to be filled. And I remember things like that happening, dating back to high school. All of my friends and peers, they wanted to be out playing their sports, having a lot of fun. And nobody wanted to be, the student body president. Nobody wanted to be the president of this club or do this, but those bodies of work were important to me. And so it was kind of this mentality of, well, if not me, then who? And I started showing up in those spaces, whether or not I was comfortable with it. And that's felt to me like the chronology of how I've developed into now today being an executive director at a nonprofit organization, is seeing when there are opportunities for a gap to be filled, and not necessarily knowing if anybody else was going to be the best person to do it. And so saying, I want my name in the hat, at least consider me. If I'm not the best person for it, then help me develop into maybe one day where I could be, so I could be of the greatest service to the team. And so I could be the greatest service to the mission. So that's that's really what leaning into leadership has been like for me. It's not been about having remarkable confidence or charisma. It's just been about showing up and being willing to do it when it's not glorified, um, being willing to make a lot of mistakes privately and publicly, and still being willing to show up the next day and do it again.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Hmm.
When I was 19 years old, I met Michelle at a
Hmm.
concert. Great place to meet somebody you're going to spend
Yeah.
the rest of your life with. And by the time I was 21, we were engaged. And
Mm.
we had the minister that came to do the wedding said, "Look, unless you guys do pre-marriage counseling, I'm not going to do the wedding. You guys are so young. There's so much you don't know."
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't think so. We thought we knew everything. But we went into pre-marriage counseling and we took that test. And I was a golden retriever. She was a beaver. But under pressure, under stress, we both turned into lions.
Okay.
And so
Mhm.
she, the counselor was like, "Okay, we need to talk about this because there's going to be a lot of pressure you guys are going to face, and you guys are going to go into attack mode, into
Mhm.
belligerence, strength, leadership. You both are going to want to lead under pressure."
Right.
So she goes, "This is going to be an issue." So
Mhm.
and she created this over a period of weeks, created an entire thing. What do we do when we both go into that mode?
That's smart.
And it's stuck with me entire life. And
Yeah.
it's been something we've actually lent on. We actually listened to
Good.
counsel at
Yeah.
20 years of age. Who knew that was going to happen?
It's again, when it's there, and if you don't have any other kind of navigator charting you out, I think it's good when those seeds get planted, even early on when you don't know the value of them. Yeah.
You've been working with Rebuilding Hope for over 9 years
Mhm.
now. Can you kind of give me a picture of really what they do? We can say sexual assault,
Mhm.
and as people get locked into a certain framework. Can you kind of draw me a picture of really what you do as an organization?
Sure, sure. We're a community sexual assault program. So if you're wondering kind of like what's that general label you put on us, every county in Washington state has one and they all can just look a little bit different. But our key goal, if you will, is to provide that lifelong comprehensive support system towards healing for anybody who has been directly or indirectly impacted by any form of sexual violence. So the spectrum is pretty broad. It can range from verbal sexual harassment to sex trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation. And because of how we see how sexual violence is perpetrated and its impacts, it's very rare for you to have even a survivor who only experiences one form of sexual violence in their lifetime. There's usually a cumulative experience or compound experience to that. So, how do we provide that comprehensive lifelong support and healing? One, it's understanding that everything we do is through a complete cone of confidentiality to that client because we get to be a nonprofit, we're community based. We keep those clients' experiences completely sealed within the confines of this organization. Information's not shared with like law enforcement, prosecution, if healthcare systems, nothing like that, because it's 100% client centered and driven. Clients come to us or connected with us, they learn what we do, and then they're in the driver's seat and they decide what are their needs based off of their experiences. What kind of support do they need to have those needs met? And to what extent do they want our staff to be involved in helping them get those needs met, whether it has to do with, again, healing, could be counseling, safety, could be safety planning, literally helping them relocate, helping them seek a protection order, helping them get connected to law enforcement to report the crime against them. And that happens through a handful of programs that includes 24/7, 365 victim advocacy. I know I'll share a little bit later how to reach that level of service. We also have some positions that carry specialized caseload. So we've got some case managers that work specifically like with trafficked and exploited or at risk individuals of being trafficked and exploited, both youth and adults. Our 24/7 advocacy services can be there for anybody, whether they've experienced the sexual violence themselves or if someone they love and know has. So we get reached out to equally by victims and survivors and by their parents or their spouses or their siblings or their roommates or coworkers. That line of communication and support is open to everybody. The counseling services, we offer lifelong access to sexual assault trauma focused therapy services for anybody who's 13 years of age or older. And there's a wait list associated with that so that we can make sure that we're offering the service to people as they're reaching out for support. There's no priority given if somebody was sexually assaulted 2 weeks ago versus 20 years ago. So it's determined by the time frame in which people come to us and say, this happened to me and I would like this help. Um, and then within our advocacy, it happens both, over the phone and in person. COVID's made that tricky, of course, but it can be anything from general emotional support to legal advocacy or medical advocacy. So one of the neat facets of services we offer is that our advocates do get in their cars at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they go to the local emergency department and meet with the patient who's been admitted for a forensic exam or medical evaluation following a sexual assault. And the services can start right then and there. So all of those services work together. And then education is the other part of our two-prong mission. If we're not actively trying to disrupt the cycles of, you know, societal assumptions or behaviors or norms that perpetuate sexual violence, then we're just going to forever be chasing our tails. So we have a prevention program that works to do everything from general outreach and community education to specialized prevention education with partner sites that targets either children and youth, parents and caregivers, or professionals and industries that are responsible for creating safe environments for youths, like schools, after school programs, church communities. So we try to not only offer the 24/7 response side of, oh no, this has happened again to somebody in our community, we need to be there for them, to also making sure that we're growing the capacity to stop this from happening as often in our own community.
We had a season of life. I started in my 20s a youth center in area that was a borderland between three different gangs,
Mm,
and we over a period of 1 year actually absorbed an entire middle school gang through our system, and it was a running gang for the Crip.
mm,
And they, by the end of the year, that gang had totally dissolved, and we considered we were very excited about some of the results from that period of time. There was a young lady that came through our youth activities, and she decided to become a police officer. And by the time she was 26,
mhm,
she became a police officer. About a year later, she came in just to sit down and talk with me. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "David, in the last 3 days, I have dealt with over 7 sexual assault victims
mm.
and abuse." He goes,
Yeah,
"Some of them are horrible." She goes,
yeah.
I just I just feel such a lack a I'm losing my own humanity because it's
Mhm,
just so much negative. I've been spit on, I've been swung at,
mm,
I've been pushed, I've had threats against my life and my family just in the last 3 days. And the
mhm.
whole time we're trying to rescue some very hurting, broken people that are in just sometimes disgusting situations.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
watched that weight on her shoulders, and we talked through it, and we got to a point where she was able to actually find her smile again because she had a
Mhm,
beautiful smile. She's a
mhm,
wonderful person. You know, there has to be a mental discipline that allows you to keep being the voice of hope and continue to maintain a true sense of team
mhm,
among your staff as a leader,
mhm,
because you got to be feeling that same weight that comes from some of the horrible experiences of the people that you're trying to lift up
mhm,
and your team as well. How do
mhm.
you, as a leader, mentally prepare yourself each week and help your team prepare themselves for this type of battle on a weekly basis?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's really it's important, and it speaks to a level of awareness that we integrate into our whole organization from the moment someone's even interviewing to be considered as a volunteer or as an employee. Because the impacts of this work, the vicarious trauma, secondary trauma related to this kind of work, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. When will you start to see that compounding weight physically hold somebody down or hold somebody back from being able to start again a new day? And, the individual you were sharing that story with and some of the, commentary you were sharing around it, I think there's a very telling um, indicator in that I want to call attention to, because it's something that we reinforce in our organization daily, is that really one of the most disempowering, I guess, attitudes that can lead to then a disempowering practice one can have if you're in human services work is this assumption that you actually should be or even can rescue anybody from anything. It's disempowering because it lends that assumption that that person is helpless and hopeless to even be able to seek their own space of safety, healing, progress. And we know enough from humanity, life, and work that that's not the case. Human beings are extremely strong and resilient, and when given the tools and the access to resources to get to a safer place, to get to a healthier place, then they can overcome. They can chart out a new life and a new future for themselves. So I would say, almost in that scenario back that you were the story you were telling about that individual just really feeling bogged down by the work, is that if you're already showing up every day with this assumption of, if I'm not here, I can't rescue them and they won't get rescued and they're going to stay in this, whatever the situation is, and the direty of it, the suffering of it, then you might as well go ahead and start checking yourself out of the work, because you've already created an assumptive environment where that person can't function without you. That person can't heal, can't have support without you. And that's not healthy or realistic to it. The mental discipline, for me, to go back to your question, it does come with, at least in my experience, a need to have a sense of compartmentalization of the daily trauma that we get exposed to by hearing people's individual narratives about their sexual assault, their sexual abuse, what they're experiencing in their exploitation or their sex trafficking circumstance, being able to compartmentalize that so you can still show up and be effective in your role, so that you can show up energized and with a clear level head to be able to identify what are the conflicts or the barriers that are preventing you from being able to get out of this situation, or that are preventing you from being able to maybe report to police, maybe leave that abuser. And what can we carve out of our capabilities to do to help you make those moves for yourself? In order for me to show up mentally prepared every day, really, every week, every month, to provide that kind of discernment and support to our staff, part of what's allowed me to do that is, as you grow, at least in our agency structures, you grow in your leadership, you have to become progressively disconnected from the daily direct services. I have become progressively disconnected from providing advocacy services, from providing case management services over the past 3 going on 4 years. It doesn't mean that I don't have any contact with survivors. It doesn't mean that I don't answer my desk phone sometimes and I have a survivor on the other end saying, I don't know where to go. What can I do? I certainly have that contact, but I understand the boundaries in place in our different roles in the agency, tied to how we ensure everybody in their role has the focus and the capacity to carry through what's expected of them in order to meet our mission, to provide that lifelong support towards healing for people impacted by sexual assault and abuse. So part of the answer to your question is, as I've been able to physically distance myself from the daily direct services work, it allows me to have more clarity of thought and understanding, so that as I start to hear either from an individual team member or an entire program and team comments like, I feel hopeless, or if they're forecasting potential burnout, or if they're saying, I don't know why we do this work sometimes. It seems like no matter what we do to serve the victim, the system fails us. As soon as I start hearing those conversations, because I'm not in the weeds with them, I've had some time to start separating from that. I've had some time to seek my own counseling for that vicarious trauma and to recenter on who we are and what we can do. I can ask the questions of, do we need to pause? Do we need to reset? Do you need a day? Do you need more than a day? Sometimes the questions are, when's the last time you took a vacation? Or it's, when's the last time did we sit down and do a deep dive on this program and really kind of evaluate its strengths, its weaknesses, what makes our advocates the very best advocates they can be for every shift, um, and to ask those questions without feeling conflicted or guilty about, if we pause and ask these questions, we're not answering, we're not responding out to every call, or we're not actively trying to, maybe in that mentality, I'm not able to actively rescue this person right now. Being able to pause and say, no, we need to stop and have these conversations. We need to reassess, because if I can't make sure each of you are taking care of yourselves, you're not going to have the capacity to answer every phone call. You're not going to have the capacity to go out to every hospital call and create every safety plan and be there to work with our system and community partners the way we need to work with them for the client's benefit. So that mental and physical separation from the daily work that does expose and re-expose you over and over again to the trauma, to the violence, I think that part of that is essential if you're going to grow in leadership, because it's the only way that you can get recentered on what are we here, what resources do we have, and what can we actually do with what we have, versus when you're in the weeds daily, you're constantly thinking it's not enough. I'm not enough. We're not enough. We're just on this, roller coaster going round and round, and we don't seem to be making a dent in it. And since coming into this leadership role I get to be in now, I can see the dent that we make in it. And we have to be a balanced act that way together.
Keep embracing the victories and understanding your niche,
Hmm.
sticking to what your role is on the team. That's
Hmm.
important.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you not take it home with you?
Oh, with that empathic part, I don't know if I've ever not taken it home. Um, with me, there was, what was it? We had a local university sent a film crew in recently to do a little promo video. They were featuring us to new students that were going through at least virtual orientation, and they wanted to get them connected with their local sexual assault center. And I remember when I was giving my spiel about the agency, and sharing what it is we do, how we do it. One of the interviewers said, "Well, just be yourself. Just be yourself. How do you talk about this daily when you're not in the office, or how would you talk about this with the average person?" And I laughed, and some of our staff laughed because they know this is what I talk about when I do go home. When my husband asks, "How was your day? What happened?" I mean, obviously there's stuff that comes up that's more about like the resources, or we're going after this grant, or we got this new partner, and things like that come up. But it is really high level about um, what we learn about in this work. What's happening to children in our community, what's happening to youth in our community. It's not just about the new COVID information about how to wear your mask or where to get vaccinated. It's our home conversations are also about the children and the youth who were basically isolated at home or in unsafe places for the better part of a year, and that were at risk and experienced higher rates of sexual violence. I don't not take it home. I think what I try to take home are the bigger picture conversations about what this means for us as adults, as human beings, what this means for us as community members, what this means for us as friends to the people who we have relationships with outside of work, what this means for us as voters when we're trying to align our values, our concerns with what I learn about and do in this work. So I don't think I don't take it home with me. What I stopped taking home with me though was, and that's where again awareness counseling really helped, doing a lot of consulting with peers both inside the agency and outside. I really had to learn to stop bringing the trauma narratives that I was repeatedly exposed to, stop taking those home. I stopped coming home and telling my husband, "I've got to tell you about this, this
Mhm.
scenario or this case that a client shared with me about today," because those details weren't necessary for me to really absorb into me or into my home, my household. And I needed to do better at protecting that space from that information, because that's really information that's only meant to be focused on that client and on their journey and on their needs, not on how I'm dealing or coping with it. So that's what I did stop taking home. But no, to my husband's dismay, our friends, I'm sure too, um, I do this work because it matters, and because there's not this clean, necessarily clock on, clock off ability to it. I wanted to be part of something that's spoken to our culture and our society and our lives. So that means I almost sometimes do feel like it's important for me to take aspects of it home. Yep. Healthy or not, I'm not sure, but that's the balance
No,
that I've had.
I have the same problem ever since, well, Michelle and I been married 30 years this year.
Mhm. Oh,
And
congratulations.
I'm the kind of person that I say, "Hey, Michelle, how was your day today?" She goes, "Oh, it was all right. We have, this and this." My wife runs probably one of the West Coast top nonprofit bookkeeping companies. She
Okay.
owns it. She's built it from the ground up, and does an amazing job taking care of the financial side of nonprofits on a
Mhm.
national scale to the small local ones, and has a great team around her. But I asked her how her day was, and she goes, "Oh, I had a good day." Then she says, "Ask me about my day," and it takes me an hour to get through the conversation. And early on, I would tell her about everything in my day, right?
Mhm.
And the negatives, the positives, the frustrations, the victories, and she would carry that. I noticed she would carry it.
Mm,
It
mhm.
took me a little while for me to figure
Mhm.
out that, I wasn't really helping by sharing everything.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
as much as I felt like we're a team, we're together in this, she's the other side of me
Hmm.
psychologically. Sometimes there's this place where I figure it out, tell her, yeah, not the whole day was great, but tell her the good stuff,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep. Yep.
And when I started reverting to just sharing the good stuff,
Hmm.
and now it wasn't all like that. I said, nope, there are other stuff, but you don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
I left that in the car. I don't want to bring
Yeah.
it inside the house. And it became a discipline. Even to this day, I want to tell her everything, but I have to choose to be careful not to burden her with my burdens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to the degree,
No.
not that I'm holding anything back, but it's a good vibe that we've got going, and it's working.
No, and I think that's very relevant because again, you can kind of bleed out, everything you see and do daily to the people around you, and you find really quickly that your circle of friends will become smaller. Sometimes that's okay, and sometimes you
Mhm.
really find out that you're isolating yourself off from other people. But I think also with increased just time on this earth, time on this work, and increased, if you want to call it a leadership skill to it, early on, I would let the trauma and I would let the horror and the negative be what led my day. And now, because I can see more realistically, like the vision that we cast for our place in the community, I see that realistically. I see in, 20, 50 years how we can really change the course of this community. And so leading with the positive, it doesn't mean that you're negating the bad. It doesn't mean that you're in denial of it or that you're dismissing it. But if you stay in that all the time, you don't tread forward. You just stagnate. And in this position I'm in and in leadership, it's my responsibility to make sure that regardless of the day-to-day sadness and trauma and pain that our staff are interfacing with and supporting our clients through daily, that is very real. That's very happening. And I never can lose touch with that. But we have to be believing in the positive future about why we're here. Otherwise, the question is, why do we even have doors open? How can we even talk about rebuilding hope for clients when we can't even believe in the hope for the vision that we've cast for the community? So yeah, you do. You've got to lead with positive. You've got to lead with the hope.
April is Sexual Awareness Month.
Hmm.
What is the best way someone who feels outside of the conversation can really feel like they can activate their support, kind of connect in
Yeah.
with with the battle you guys are facing?
Yeah, absolutely. April Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I think we also just passed Sexual Assault Awareness Week last week or 2 weeks ago. So, one is to always realize that sexual violence, like many of the causes that are out there, they are happening whether there's an awareness a month around it or not. But April is always a great season for us to have some higher visibility to our work and to our services and our mission. If you feel like you're outside the conversation, or if you do hear this and you're thinking, I don't even know where to begin wrapping my head around sexual violence, sexual assault, sexual abuse. Where do I begin? Um, an easy way is to use social media, use the internet to your advantage. Follow us, follow even national groups if you want to. There's RAIN, RAINN, that's what operates the national hotline that can help filter some people directly to their community of where they reside if they're trying to get 24/7 support. They've got great information. You can follow us. We've got Facebook accounts, Instagram. Our website is sexualassaultcenter.com. Sometimes just starting there and learning the language, learning the terminology, learning the services that are out there will help you better understand what is the sexual assault piece, what is happening to people, and what do they do when it happens to them or to somebody that they love. Um, Through that, don't be afraid to ask questions. If you see that there's open, drop-in workshops, or you see that there's a place to even engage in social media and to ask questions, especially if it's hosted by us or a similar organization to ours, and it's a safer space for you to say, I don't understand this. Can you clarify this for me? Um, Learn about trainings and events that we're hosting. If you're in the South Sound area, the Pierce County, Washington area, especially because of COVID, we've been able to be far more creative. We are starting to plan more in-person events, hopefully that we can safely do this year. But we're about to wrap up a 30-hour virtual basic sexual assault awareness training. It started earlier this month, and it's open to the public. You don't have to be a staff member. You don't have to be a community professional to do it. You can be a member of Pierce County community or somewhere else that just wants to come and learn all things about sexual assault, sexual violence, how it's perpetrated, its impacts, and what are the responses out there in the community. In April, because it is that awareness month, we are going to be having, hopefully, all things work in our favor, an in-person fundraiser at the Silver Cloud Hotel in Point Ruston in Tacoma, Washington. There'll be a first time for us in a couple of years to re-engage with either people who have historically supported us or are new and getting acquainted with us. So, follow us, follow other community sexual assault programs. You can call the Washington Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs in Washington State and find out what county has what organization paired with it. We tell people all the time too, call our hotline. I know that seems weird today. This is very much the age of connecting through typing or through texting, and we do have a confidential online chat portal where people can type in messages and chat with an advocate directly. But we always tell people our hotline is confidential. You don't, and it's anonymous. You don't have to identify yourself. You can call and say, hi, I'm 15 years old. I have questions about this, but I don't want you to know anything about me. That's totally fine. Let's get some information. Or you can be that freaking out parent at 9 o'clock at night. The kids have gone to bed. They brought up something at dinner time. You don't know what to do. Call your local sexual assault center. Call us if you're in Pierce County and say that very same thing. I have these children. This came up at dinner time. I have no idea what to do. Can you help me? Our responsibility is to be providing safer spaces, whether it's in trainings, community events, the way that we make our services available. We're supposed to be making safer spaces so people can do that exact same thing. So they can come forward and say, I'm nervous to talk about this. I don't know even how to ask the question, but I'm hoping that I'm safe to at least start here. And if we're not able to respond to that in an effective way, then we've got a lot of work to do. But I know because I've done the work for years. I know our team members. I know our advocates, our case managers. I know our counseling, even our administrative staff who doesn't do the direct services daily. We're here to help people get the correct information and to understand the options and to walk away feeling better equipped to understand how sexual violence can impact them and the whole community.
The truth is, if you look beyond the walls of your own life, you'll start being aware that it is actually happening around us.
Mhm.
And we need to know what to do
Mhm.
when a friend confides with us.
Yep.
It was a hard lesson for me to learn. When I was a teenager, I was 18. I
Mhm.
had a very dear friend, to this day, a good friend, and she confided in me that she was sexually assaulted. I didn't know what to do. I
Mhm.
I, I
Yeah.
froze. I was,
Yeah.
and I can to this day remember exactly where I was standing when I was told.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I remember that blankness came over my mind, like, I can't believe this has happened to this
Mhm.
person. But I didn't. I was literally no help to her at all, right?
Oh.
And I completely froze.
Mhm.
And I carried that almost like a shame for a couple of
Oh.
years. Like, I
Yeah.
said, I need to know. So I became aware. I found out what I kind of built a plan. If this ever happened to me again,
Yep.
I don't want to be caught in that position.
Right.
And sure enough, when I was 21, I had a young lady come and share something that was happening to her.
Mhm.
And I just clicked in, I called a counselor who worked with a CPA. We got with a CPS, and we got into that,
Mhm.
and she found the help she needed.
Good.
And it was a matter of going from being frozen in a situation where
Mhm.
I didn't know even where to start to being, even though it was uncomfortable, be able to find and help that friend to a needed outcome. And both people are friends to me to this day.
That's
And I keep
wonderful.
thinking to myself, as I was raising my own children, you're going to have a friend who's going to be hurting.
Mhm.
This is how we're going to respond to it, because I didn't want them to feel what I felt when I was 18.
That's
And
huge. That's exactly what that shift is about. It's knowing that things like this are going to catch you off guard. It's okay if you don't know the things, if you don't know what to say or do. It's important to know who you can go to learn what to do. And what an incredible, turnabout that you
yeah.
had happen there.
Walk me through what you say are the four important steps of to stop sexual abuse. You have a number that you talk about, these four
Mhm.
that really are part of who you guys are as an organization. I don't want to take a lot of time, but if can you
Mhm.
just take me through one, two, three, four?
Yeah, to stop sexual abuse, first, education is the key. And education starts with conversations. You have to be talking about what is sexual violence, who perpetrates it, how, what are its impacts, so that you can start. If people don't have that initial empathy or awareness, it can be taught. Um, and then, really, the remaining steps have to do with being there to perpetrator, or when you're in another threatening situation that can potentially disrupt or prevent sexual assault or abuse from happening again. But really, education, advocacy for rights and needs on behalf of survivors, and then counseling, support, further education for survivors to understand how this will impact them for the life course. That's really your trifecta, and helping the public understand this is not an individual issue. Sexual violence is part of our culture because sex and sexuality is so heavily um, interthreaded through as part of our culture. So we can't have one without the other. And if we don't take individual responsibility and accountability for being educated about this, talking about it, and understanding that we are responsible for whether or not we are sexually harassing or sexually assaulting or abusing another person, then we won't stop sexual abuse from happening. So, personal accountability, education, advocacy, and therapy, those are the steps. And that's what we work to at least frame, if not offer directly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
When you're building your team,
Mhm.
going back to really a subject matter, what characteristics do you look for in a person you're interviewing?
I'm looking for honesty. I know some of these are going to sound cliche, but it's true. Honesty, experience is great, but really trainability. Are you teachable? If you're coming here with the heart and the commitment to it, and you've got some moldable skills, can you be trained to do this work, and can you adhere to how you're trained to do it? An openness or a willingness to learn and understand how trauma occurs and how it impacts individuals and the community. If you're coming in just really steadfast of, I only believe this, or I only think this is the way it can happen, it's going to be hard to do this work because you have to be open to the fact that we are dealing with humans, we are dealing with trauma. And if you think at any point in time, I know, fill in the blank, you're going to have, you're going to be blown away the very next day because we learn something new every day from our clients. And then self awareness. How much are you aware of yourself, how you're presenting, how your speech is presenting? Um, are you aware of how this work can impact you? Do you walk in here thinking that you are going to be invincible against the trauma of the work? Or are you open to understanding that this work will have vicarious trauma impacts on you, and it will create biases within you and how you present to clients and to the community that you're here to serve? So that, the honesty, teachability, openness to learning and to understanding, in general, being able to follow rules and policies, being able to be collaborative internally to the organization and collaborative with systems in the community. That can be really hard. But if you're willing to do it, then this can work for you. And then self-awareness, because it's human work. We have to show up as ourselves to do it. And if you don't have that self-awareness, it's going to be difficult to be able to be in the work long term for it. That's what I would look for.
I love the term self awareness
Mhm.
when it comes to somebody's in staff. That also can lead to independence, a real sense of independence and being
Can.
separated from the team.
Yeah.
You're into building strong teams.
Mhm.
What do you do? What steps should you take to take as somebody who is self-aware, that is feeling independent, and
Mhm.
make them feel that they're part of a group accomplishing a task as a staff?
I think that independence and really, independent, I should say, an independent personality, and the way that we as an organization try to value individual identities is important. It's okay. And we actually expect for people who work with us over time, as they get a feel for the work, to work independently, to have autonomy, to be able to bring part of themselves into the work because it's human oriented. But at the end of the day, we have a core set of values. We have a core set of ethics, of principles. We have core policies and procedures that have to be followed with it. So it really comes back to understanding you can bring as much of yourself to the work as you are able to manage and handle. And understanding that we've got policies and rules and procedures in place so that the clients don't have an inconsistent experience in how they receive, let's say, medical advocacy from advocate A to getting medical advocacy from advocate B over here. So it's about having consistent themes and practices in how our team does their work while giving everybody room to be their individual selves, but understanding that those consistent themes and practices are to create a consistent experience for the clients. Again, especially to kind of derail against any of this assumption of heroics or, savior identities behind it. We always try to design our programs and our services so that no client is heavily reliant on one single person. It's yes, you may have this community advocate or this case manager or this therapist dedicated to you, but they're dedicated to you with a whole network of this team behind them. Because there will be a day that this person is maybe out sick, they're on vacation, they're on bereavement leave, or they've decided to try something else completely different professionally. And if we have good, consistent practices, policies, procedures as a team, then you should expect the same quality and level of service, even if this person's not here specifically today to work with you. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does.
Okay.
I was given a gift when I was in my early 30s. It was a knight on a horse, a white knight on a
Yep.
horse. And I came home. I said, Michelle, look, this gift I was given by this family. And she looked at it and she looked at me and says, that's not a compliment. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm
Yeah.
a hero. She goes,
Yeah.
that's not what you want to be.
Mm-mm.
And I remember
Mhm.
battling that thought process, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants a pat on the back, everyone wants to feel like, but in what you and I do,
Mhm.
it's not the way we need to be approaching it.
Nope. It's not realistic. It's not sustainable. And it's not person centered. It's in no way empowering or validating to whoever your customer, client, or constituent is. Again, whether you work in victim services, whether you serve children and youth, if you work with people experiencing homelessness or people who have, food insecurities, if you have that heroics, I'm the savior, I'm the white knight, I have the cape on, it really does injustice to the whole model of disrupting those cycles of oppression, violence. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. It goes back to what you said earlier in our conversation.
Mhm.
You have to realize that you're not responsible to rescuing the person. They have the strength and the ability to rescue themselves.
Mhm.
We're just supporting them on their journey.
Yeah.
And that is intricate to being able to be successful as a nonprofit leader or support as we're rescuing or feeling like we're needing to rescue any parts of our society.
That's right.
It's not us. We create opportunity, but they
Mhm.
have to make the choice.
Yep. And they need to be given the tools to do it. That's what I can't
Absolutely.
emphasize on it. They have to have the tools to do it, not just the options, but the resources. Yep. Yep. You got
That's
it.
good.
Mhm.
If somebody is listening right now and needs to reach out for help, what's the best way they connect with you and your team?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier we have a 24/7, 365 hotline. It does not close on the nights or weekends. It's open on the holidays and is staffed by an incredible team that I can't speak highly enough about. And I will get emotional if I start speaking about them for a long time. But that number is for here locally, Tacoma Pierce County, area code 253-474-7273. There are human beings on the other line of that number that are there to answer your questions, give information, offer services, and to get those services started. Another way is through our website. We're at sexualassaultcenter.com, and under the advocacy services tab, you can be led to a portal where you can engage in a confidential online chat with an advocate during the work week. So you've got a couple different ways to reach out directly to that.
Before the end of every conversation, we
Yeah.
do a shout out to a nonprofit we think is doing a great job. I
Mhm.
love this part of every interview.
Yes,
So I'm going to go first and then
okay,
I'm going to hand it to you. Is that all right?
absolutely.
All right. Well, you like to know who Charity Navigator is listing as the top 10 charities with the most consecutive 4-star ratings in America. The last week we did a shout out to robinhood.org. And this week we want to look at number 7, And for 19 years, this organization has scored the highest possible rating for transparency and fulfilling their mission with the resources that are donated to them. The name of that organization is called Kids Alive International. Kids Alive provides programs for early interventions through education, while also meeting physical needs and providing discipleship that promotes hope in difficult circumstances. Many Kids Alive programs provide trauma-informed care for children and teens who are at higher risk and who have suffered abuse. And if you'd like to know more about Kids Alive, go to kidsalive.org and have a look at what they're doing. They've got a great website. They're really connected well in with social media. They're trying to get the voice of hope into the communities they're reaching. And check them out. They're really an amazing group. All right, Carlyn, it is your turn. Who do you like to give a shout out to?
I love that you do this. I love shouting out to great orgs and great partners. And I'm going to cheat. So I'm going to ask for forgiveness afterwards. I'm going to share two because they are two organizations that we partner with.
You're not allowed to say two.
I know. I'm sorry, but
I
couldn't choose between the two, and I would feel unethical in doing so. One is Washington Trafficking Prevention. They are located here out of Tacoma, Washington, but they provide statewide survivor-led and survivor-informed prevention interventions, including presentations, trainings, both to community members and to professionals in order to equip the vulnerable and to engage communities to stop human trafficking in Washington state. And the other partner is our Sisters House. They offer culturally specific victim advocacy services for any victims of crime, but the culturally specific portion of that is for African-American individuals and families who are impacted by any type of crime, and specifically lens towards gender-based violence. So they are two proud partners of ours in this work, and we're thrilled to have them here, and I couldn't elevate them enough. So I had to feature both of them. Thank you for humoring me.
I am glad you did. Do you know what their URLs are?
Oh, hold on. This is where I was not prepared. Let me pull it up real quickly.
You know, Carlyn, it has been really a treat to have you with us. And thank you for just sharing your experiences and your thoughts on leadership.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here today and to get to have these conversations with you. Again, I don't get to stop often and have them, so I hope it was of help for people. The URLs that you were asking for Washington Trafficking Prevention, their site is traffickingprevention.org. Our Sisters House is oursistershouse.com.
Very good. .com.
.com. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Carlyn. And to everyone that is listening to this podcast, thank you for what you do as nonprofit leaders, as nonprofit volunteers. We need you, and we are so grateful that you are standing in the gap for those in your community and sharing your resources with them. Keep doing such a great job, and until we speak again in another few days, have a great day.